welcome everyone who's joining at the moment. We'll give it a minute or two just to make sure everyone's here who wants to be. I will share a quick survey in the chat. If you can should only take about a minute to complete, and it helps inform us what your understanding is at the moment about the Sustainable Farming Incentive. And then I'll also pop one in the chat at the end as well, where you can tell us how you think this webinar went and what improvements you might like us to make for the next ones. As you can see on the screen, welcome everyone who's just joined. This session is being recorded. We record it so anyone who can't join can view it after, and we will publish it on the blog. If you don't know about the blog, it's called the Farming Blog, and we'll be sharing a link to that in the chat. We will also do a follow-up blog with some of the top Q&A that comes up in this session, so keep an eye out for that. It's always useful to try and subscribe for updates. We will be using Slido in this session to help us record all the questions that you pop through. I will share a link to that now. We are very lucky today as we have Dan Proctor, who is in SFI. He's a farmer and he's very kindly agreed to share his experience, which we'll go into straight away at the start. And then next on the agenda will be a presentation from Melanie Edgar, who is one of our policy leads in the Sustainable Farming Incentive. And then we hope to leave a good part of the session, the last half an hour hopefully, we'll dedicate that to Q&A. So I've just popped the Slido link in the chat where questions need to go. And you can also upvote questions in there if you see one that you were already going to ask. So please use that Slido link. I think numbers have stabilised. Just a reminder, there is an opening survey in the chat. There's a link to subscribe to our DEFRA Farming blog. That means you'll receive any updates and you'll be able to see the recording once it's published. And any questions for our presenters today, you can pop in Slido. I think that's all from me. And I will pass over to our farmer, Dan Proctor. Hi, Dan.
Hello everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. As Rebecca said, I've been asked to give a bit of a overview about my experience with the SFI. So I thought I'd first by introducing myself, who I am and where we are. So yeah, my name is Daniel Proctor, and we are a small hill sheep farm on the Yorkshire-Lancashire border. It's a family-run farm. We have livestock, a small number of sheep, and we also have quite a significant area of woodland, of which the majority of that was planted in 2008. The type of sheep that we have are primitive native breeds. Fortunately, we haven't started lambing yet, so that's why I'm able to just quickly do this presentation for you. The farm has been in our family for 5 generations. I lose count now, but certainly it's been in our family since 1900. That's when we moved to this farm, and we've always had a focus on the environment with our farming practices, and that's one of the reasons why I thought it would be a good opportunity to sign up for the SFI. Before the SFI, we are also a SFI pilot farmer, so I've been involved with various different things that have helped shape the main SFI scheme. So that's been quite interesting to see how it's all developed. So other reasons why we wanted to join the SFI was obviously the reduction of BPS, the disappearing BPS payments. We've been looking for options and opportunities where we can fill that gap a little bit to some extent. So that's one of the reasons. Like I said before, the farm practices have always had the environment as one of the core aims. So the actions with the SFI fit in nicely with that. One of the other things that we wanted to join the SFI was because we actually sell a lot of our products directly to the end user. So our meat goes directly, we sell directly to the consumer. So when we can talk about being part of the SFI and all the benefits of the actions of being part of the SFI, that kind of helps towards our marketing message for our products as well. Just looking at my notes, bear with me. Yeah, so in terms of the application process, it was very straightforward to apply. I did it myself, did it online myself. I didn't need the help of any land agent or advisor. It was very straightforward online process, ticking boxes. You were able to view which parcels you wanted to put into the actions. It was all quite straightforward. I had one little glitch with land use codes back in November. This is when I applied in November. I had a bit of communication backwards and forwards with DEFRA. Tried to clarify it a little bit. I was still a little bit confused. In the end, I decided to just leave those parcels that had land use error codes on them and just put in the application for ones that were straightforward. In the end, there was actually a video tutorial which showed exactly what I needed to do to correct those land use codes, and it was that helped me, correct them. And in the end, it was very, very straightforward. You just had to make the numbers add up, and there were very slight discrepancies. So I would recommend having a look at the DEFRA YouTube channel to see there if you have that same problem. Yes, we now have an SFI agreement. We've been in since December. We were one of the first ones, so we got an advance payment. We qualified for one of the advance payments up front rather than waiting 3 months for your first payment. So that was helpful. We are in the low and no input grassland type actions, which again fits in with our farming practices, where we don't apply any artificial fertilizer, minimal farmyard manure on there. So that was just a straightforward, quick win. We're also in some hedgerow actions, which again, we have some hedgerows on the farm, some of which are old sort of hedgerows and some of which have been newly planted in an earlier scheme, not through SFI, but with an earlier scheme. So that's good to get the support there for those. The payments are a bit, the hedgerow payments are a bit, they're okay, they're better than nothing, but I suppose they could be better. But like I say, they were already there, so it was good to get that support. We also because of the SFI, there are 3 actions that we've joined that are new to our farming practice. So that I'm undergoing some sort of research on how to do those, and that's the SAM1, NUM1, and IPM1, integrated pest management, nutrient management, and soil assessment. All those kind of things we've not actually formally done on the farm before. So I'm currently seeking help from actual advisors in order to achieve those actions, and it's proving to be fairly straightforward, and I'm pretty confident that the payments for those actions should completely cover the cost of getting a professional in to do those. Some of them I could do myself, but as I've done my research, it's turned out that it's probably more economical to just get one person to do the whole lot. So that's what I'm hoping. It's a bit more costly, but I still think that because it's doing all of them, the payment should cover that. It'll be interesting also to see the results of those, because whilst we've not done them before, we've always ummed and ahed about whether we should do them. So now it's given us that prod to actually get on with it and do it. And the results of those, I'm pretty sure I'll know what the results will be. But again, it'll help us with our marketing. For example, we do sell traditional hay to all sorts of types of customers, of which they have some of their animals require low sugar. So we've always said, well, yes, it's it's not enriched, but we've never had that concrete evidence. So I'm hoping these results will actually be able to turn around to them and say, well, yes, it is X, Y, and Z. I have looked at doing some capital grants for some of the actions, but in the end, I did do a bit of fencing on the pilot, but I haven't actually done anything with the SFI capital grants yet, mainly because most of it was done with the capital grants with the pilot work. So I haven't really had much necessarily need to do it with the SFI, but I'm pretty sure it would be a straightforward process for doing it. It would be easier than the pilot. The SFI capital grants should be a lot easier than the pilot. The pilot wasn't difficult anyway. Generally speaking, I'm feeling quite confident about how it's all going with the SFI, especially with the new actions that have been announced in, that are coming in 2024. The whole series of new actions, particularly of interest to a farm like us in the Uplands, in the Yorkshire Dales and the Lancashire borders, the stone walling, haymaking supplements, the natural flood management stuff. That all sounds quite interesting. So I'm waiting to see how the information, how the detail comes out during the course of the year as to whether or not we'll get involved with that. Another benefit of these schemes is that you can review them every year, and I'm hoping to do that once we have a bit of clarity on these new actions. Come Christmas time this year, I'll be maybe adding a few different items on there, assuming they're not too difficult to implement. Things like the haymaking supplement, we would have gone into that already under a different scheme had it not been for rules like the 15th of July cutoff. And I know there's been a lot of feedback about that being a blocker to a lot of farms like us. They've not gone into that because of the 15th of July cutoff. Obviously, the reason being behind the nesting birds, but in our main hay meadow, we can see there's no nesting curlews. We can just tell. So I'm hoping that with the more flexible nature of SFI, that things like some of the black and white hard rules might just be softened as they come into SFI, assuming they do come into SFI and not countryside stewardship. We don't know. We'll see. And that's what this year's. It'll be interesting to see what situation is. My time's coming to an end now, so I'll just like to summarize by saying I'm glad I went into SFI. I would recommend it. We haven't gone into any historical agreements because it's been too much aggro. The SFI is totally different, a lot easier. Have a look at it. Go online. Get as far as just see what you think. You don't, there's a final button clicking submit. You don't have to click it. Just see what you think. And I think it's going to be quite interesting, and I recommend doing it. I'll just close by putting a little link in the chat to our website. If anyone wants to find out more about how we do things here, then I'll just put a link to our website in the chat. And it's got information about what we do and how, things like selling direct to customers, which is quite key to our business model. So that's a link. And that's the end of my presentation. I'll be answering any questions at the end. If you've got any questions for me, that's no problem. Okay, back to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Dan. That was brilliant to hear your sort of experience of it, and that you do find it a sort of improved scheme with the flexibility. And I agree with you. I think it's just worth everyone taking a look, having a go at maybe applying. You're not committed until you accept the agreement, so it's worth having a look at the application. I will pop a video in the chat actually that shows you how to apply, and while I do that, I will pass on to Mel. Just to remind you, Mel, you may have to share your screen again. I did take it off during Dan's update just so we could see Dan's face.
Oh, apologies. You definitely need to see that more than you need to see my screen. So let me just swing this back up again, because that was definitely the right decision. There we go. Can you just confirm, Becky, that that's gone full screen and all working okay?
Yeah, looks great to me.
Excellent, fantastic. In that case, while Becky posts some additional links, I'll start talking. And just to say thank you again, Dan, that was really brilliant. It's always good to hear when things are going right and moving in the right direction, but also always useful to hear when we could improve things and kind of pieces of feedback that you found along the way. And I've certainly learned a few things that I can take away and go and discuss with colleagues internally, which is always the great thing about doing these events. As mentioned earlier, I'm going to do a little bit of a talk about the things that we announced in January and a little bit of an update of kind of where things are going. But just to introduce myself, so I'm Melanie Edgar. My job title is Technical Policy Advisor within DEFRA, which doesn't really tell you very much. So to put it another way, my job is to work out what we pay people to do in order to support the delivery of our environmental benefits and our various other targets. So essentially, I work out what we need to fund through our schemes. There's a number of technical policy advisors, so I'm just one. My colleague Jen and my colleague Caroline are also on the call. And there's a number of others. We all have different specialist areas. Mine is traditionally moorlands and species management, but more than happy today, if you've got questions more broad than what I present to you today, please do raise those and we'll either get you an answer or we'll take them away if we need to. But just to start with kind of a general overview, I wanted to kind of provide some reassurance and a kind of general statement. We want to make sure that you as farmers have more money, more choice, and that you feel you have more trust from us. We back our farmers and will continue to support you to do what you do best, which is produce food hand in hand with preserving diversity and the abundance of nature. We have essentially, it boils down to we have 3 goals. We want to support farmer-led innovation and improve productivity around domestic food production to ensure we have really resilient farm businesses within this country. We also want to enhance the environment and farm alongside working with nature. And we want to support continual improvement in farm animal health and welfare as well. And all of the schemes that I'm going to talk about today, which will be quite a long list, I'll try and keep my presentation as short as I can while giving you as much information as I can. All of our schemes are designed to support the delivery of these 3 goals. Now, some schemes are more focused on one goal than the other, but we're all meant to be working in balance to achieve these 3 things. Now, just to be clear, and some of you might have been involved with this before, but we've been making changes about how we work with farmers. We want to make sure that farmers are treated with respect and fairness, and we want you to see us as a trusted advisor, somebody you can come to with feedback, somebody who will listen and understand what you need. So we're working on co-designing and testing our schemes with farmers to ensure they work for all farm businesses, that there's something for everybody. And we've also been looking at regulation to try and make things more simple, more fair and more proportionate so that you feel supported to enter our schemes and you also feel like there is a scheme out there for you. We've not only worked with farmers, we've also worked with agronomists, vets, academic professionals. So there's a whole host of people involved in designing these schemes. And we hope that that makes a better kind of well-rounded scheme at the end of the day. As was mentioned earlier, and you'll all be aware, we're phasing out area-based subsidies so that we can invest that money back into farm productivity, the environment, and animal health and welfare. So we're trying to do this in a phased approach to give farmers the time and opportunity to adapt to the changes that we're introducing. And we're essentially providing 2 ways of receiving payment going forwards, some of which will be ongoing schemes. So these are like our environmental land management schemes. You might be familiar with countryside stewardship that's been running for a number of years. These are schemes that provide an annual payment. So you get a regular payment in order to deliver certain actions on the ground. But we also have schemes that come under the one-off grant category. So this might be to purchase equipment or to purchase technology. And these are kind of one-off fixed grants. You don't get a regular income from them necessarily, but they do support you to do certain actions. And the idea of having this flexibility is allowing you as farmers to pick and choose the package that works for you. As long as we're not paying for the same thing twice, you can be in a combination of schemes, getting different types of support as suits your farm business. And we want to make sure that all farm types, regardless of size, location, ownership, business model, etc., have some support from us and somewhere that they can find something that works for them. So in January, we announced what we consider to be the biggest upgrade to farming schemes since the start of the agricultural transition. And we announced that at the Oxford Farming Conference. Excuse me. The announcement that we made outlined the progress we've made towards the goals I mentioned at the beginning, but also what we're aiming to do in the years ahead. And I just want to touch upon kind of 5 key points that we announced. The first thing is there will be more money available. We acknowledge that it's really important that we pay appropriate rates for our schemes, and we've recalculated our payment rates using the latest cost and income data. And that means that on average, the value of SFI and CS agreements will increase by around 10%. And this applies both for new and existing actions. We've also aligned prices. So for those of you who might have been in countryside stewardship before, you may have noticed that we pay you quite often a higher price to create the habitat. And then once you've created it, you might get a lower price to maintain it. And where possible, we've aligned those. So actually for that habitat, whether you're creating it, whether you're maintaining it, we are paying you the same payment rate in order to better reflect the real cost of delivering these habitats on the ground. Secondly, we want to make sure that we're giving you more choice. So we are introducing around 50 more actions to our offers, and we're also amending a further 50. So it's not just about new, it's also about what we're improving in our schemes to make them work better for you. We're hoping that this will mean we have an attractive offer for all farm types and locations, and in turn, it'll help us to meet our various nature and climate targets. Later in this presentation, I'll talk through a couple of the kind of key areas as I see them for Uplands, but please note, I won't cover every new offer in this presentation. So we will direct you towards the technical annex so that you can kind of read for all of the different habitats and farm types that you have on your land, what might be available across those. The third thing that we announced is that we really want to put more trust. We're going to be taking a more advisory and prevent approach to regulation to make things fairer for farmers who are participating in our schemes. There are also information in the Oxford announcement around the expansion of permitted development rights. Excuse me. The fourth thing that we've been looking at is providing a better service. So we often hear that applying for our schemes is quite complicated, and some of you on this call may agree. So from next summer, we're aiming to make it so that you have a single application service for SFI and CS mid-tier actions, so that farmers and land managers can see and understand and apply for what's available to them in a straightforward way, with hopefully less paperwork. We are also exploring how we can simplify and work on CS higher tier applications to make them simpler as well. There is more ambition as well we've announced for. So you may have noticed that some of our actions we've said we're paying a premium. So we know that there are some actions out there that we really need farmers to do in order to achieve some of our environmental targets, but some of those actions might be particularly complicated or difficult to deliver. So for the first time from 2024, we will be introducing premium payments to encourage farmers to deliver those super important high value actions where we know that we need high uptake. And some of those actions include lowland peat, lowland heath, lapwing nesting plots, agroforestry, and some of our moorland actions. And as I've said, a full kind of list of all of these new actions and some of this information can be found in the Agricultural Transition Plan update that I'm sure my colleagues have already linked in the chat. So some things are open now, and I just want to flag and highlight those in case anybody leaves this presentation feeling super inspired and wants to go and do something immediately. So you can currently apply to receive payments under Sustainable Farming Incentive for doing farming practices that help to produce food sustainably, and hopefully some of what you've heard from Dan has kind of got you interested in that scheme. We also have the England Woodland Creation offer and some other schemes open to support tree planting and the management of trees, if that is something that is of interest to you. And we also have grant schemes open at the moment for restoring peatland in uplands and lowlands through the Nature for Climate Peatland grant. So please feel free to go and have a look at those after today. just to reiterate a little bit about sustainable farming incentive, although I feel like Dan did a fantastic job of this without needing me today. I am going to cover today our 3 environmental land management schemes, but I'm going to start with sustainable farming incentive, which pays farmers for taking actions that support food production, farm productivity and resilience. Oh, what happened there? My presentation doesn't want to talk about SFI, whilst protecting and enhancing the environment. So our offer is now open, and we've received over 16,000 applications as of the 25th of March, which gets me very excited. There are 23 actions on offer at the moment, including some around soil health and moorlands and hedgerows. So I really encourage you to go and have a look at what's suitable for you. And be aware, as Dan said, that that scheme is expanding in 2024 to include some of the new actions that we'll talk about later. So if you come in now, don't worry, those new actions will still be available to you going forwards. But also you can come in now. Just to note, some of the actions are stackable. So if you have a look at one and you think, I'd like to do that, but I'd also like to do that one, please do check the compatibility, because some of them can be put on the same parcels and stacked together. So it's possible to do combinations of actions that suit you. To note that we've also introduced a new management payment in 2023 to cover the admin costs of entering our schemes. And this has particularly helped a number of small farmers to sign up, which is exciting. At the NFU conference in February, we announced that we are doubling that management payment up to £2,000 in the first year of agreements entered into by March 2025. And this means that thousands of farmers that have applied for SFI will receive this top up in spring. And that's to recognise that, there are costs to applying and coming into scheme, and we want to support people to do that. Where possible, we've made SFI as flexible as we can so that tenants on short-term rolling tenancies, etc., can come in, provided they expect to have management control for enough time. And we've put in rolling application windows and straightforward applications to make it as simple and as easy to get in. As Dan mentioned earlier, SFI has quarterly payments, so you don't have to wait till the end of the year and get it all in one go. You can have quarterly payments throughout the year, so you're regularly receiving payment for the actions that you do. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, sustainable farming incentive sits with other schemes. So if you're being paid for actions on a field in another scheme, do check whether there are still sustainable farming incentive actions that are compatible. There might not be. There are some circumstances where it's not possible, but there are many where it is, and it's always worth checking. Now, I want to quickly touch upon our latest announcement, which came out earlier this week, and some of you will have been aware of, which places limits on some of the sustainable farming incentive actions. So just to be aware, a few of our sustainable farming incentive actions involve taking food out of production for periods of time. So for example, to provide food for wildlife or improve soil productivity. And these actions are designed to be used on relatively small area of lands. We are aware that an extremely small number of agreement holders are putting very large areas of land, 80% plus, into these actions. But this reduces the environmental benefit that the action itself delivers and also takes the land out of agricultural production unnecessarily. What is happening to my slides today? Please accept my apologies, everyone. I'll realign myself. So there has been some feedback from the sector that it would be helpful to introduce some targeted restrictions on these actions, and therefore we have listened and we have acted. So we have introduced new measures to safeguard our domestic food production by limiting the amount of land farmers can enter into these 6 SFI actions as listed on the scheme. Under these changes, SFI applicants will only be able to put a total of up to 25% of their land in one or more of these actions listed. Please note, for any of you in sustainable farming incentive already, these changes will not apply to those farmers with existing SFI agreements. And we'll realign these actions with their original intentions and ensure it continues to support farmers to produce food sustainably alongside the environment. So I said I would touch on all of our countryside stewardship, all of our environmental land management schemes, and kind of the second level up from sustainable farming incentive, or kind of environmental land management scheme Mark II, is countryside stewardship. So this has been running for a number of years, but we're really aiming to make a lot of improvements to this. So countryside stewardship has over 35,000 live agreements. Unlike sustainable farming incentive, which has more generalist actions, countryside stewardship generally has quite targeted actions relative to specific locations and features on habitats. As I've mentioned, mid-tier will align with sustainable farming incentive going forwards, and it'll be possible to submit one application. And to note that you can apply for a CS capital grant all year round, or CS grant all year round as well. We aim through countryside stewardship to support a wide range of environmental outcomes, from restoring habitats to creating woodlands and managing flood risks. Farmers and land managers through countryside stewardship are being supported to manage nearly 50,000 miles of hedgerow and create or restore over 8,000 miles of hedgerow. There are also 16,000 hectares of buffer strips, creating wildlife-rich habitat for pollinators and preventing pollutions from getting in our rivers. So there are really exciting things being delivered through countryside stewardship. You'll notice that I've only really talked about mid-tier today. That's not because there's anything wrong with higher tier, but more information on higher tier will be available shortly. So I focused on what I can talk about in detail today. In higher tier, agreements are different on each farm, and the actions are generally more complex and requiring advice, support, and formal consent. So we're likely to continue to operate a separate process for those more complex actions, but we will make sure that we deliver that in a faster and more streamlined service. So just to talk about Upland specifically then, what have we improved? What have we been trying to do for Upland? So I've already said that we want to make sure that all farm types, regardless of size, location, ownership, etc., can access funding that works for them. And I also want to acknowledge that upland farmers play a vital role in our countryside, and uplands provide many environmental benefits, and the farmers who manage them maintain some of our most iconic landscapes. And I say that as somebody who lives and works in the Yorkshire Dales. Upland farmers will therefore be well placed to benefit from our new environmental land management schemes, which are aiming to reward and support farmers to deliver environmental actions. What we have done in order to support upland farmers specifically is we have aligned payment rates. So we received a number of comments about the fact that there are upland and lowland payment rates, same action, but where the upland payment rate is lower than the lowland payment rate for doing the same thing. We have equalised those payment rates. Now that does mean that for some options, you now need to look for slightly different wording when you're looking for the option. And therefore on the next slide, I'll just show you the 5 that we have equalised so that you kind of get a feel for which ones those are and where you might need to look for new option codes. We've also introduced greater flexibility and introduced the SFI management payment, which will be available to upland farmers who want to come into sustainable farming incentive. We've also designed new actions and amended existing actions that deliver specifically for uplands, and I'll talk about those in a bit more detail in a minute. So just to say, what we have done on equalising upland and lowland payment rates. If you are familiar with any of these action codes, please note that this will be in the recording, so you're more than welcome to study this in more detail. But these are the 5 where we've equalised, so you can see on the left-hand side the old rates that we had, and on the right-hand side the new payment rates that we had. And we think it's really important to reflect that where we're asking for the same action on lowland and upland systems, we now have the same payment rate to support farmers equally. So I mentioned we've got a new and expanded moorland offer to be introduced in SFI from 2024. We've also rebalanced, as you've just seen, prices for the creation and management of grassland habitats. And many of those prices are also increasing. So you may have noticed in the technical annex, but if not, just to highlight it, the price for maintaining species-rich grassland, as an example, has increased from 182 to 646 pounds per hectare. So we really have reviewed those costs, taken feedback on board, and looked at what it's appropriate to pay people for going forwards. I mentioned we developed a new moorland offer, so I just want to kind of flag that, and then I'll flag a couple of other offers. But as I said at the start, please have a look at the technical annex, because I won't cover everything today, and I think it's really important to flag that so that you know that there is more available even than I'm going to cover today. But these are the new actions for moorland and upland peat, and I'm the moorland content development lead. So hello, if anybody has any follow-up questions on these or wants a quick chat, then please do let me know. But essentially the new moorland offer is divided down into grazing management actions, seen at the bottom, and kind of habitat, vegetation and water management actions, seen as the 4 at the top. So we are going to support people to manage their stocking density on moorlands, but we're going to do so in a more fair manner than we have previously. In that, we are varying our payment rate for stocking on moorlands so that the more change you make to your stocking, or perhaps the lower you keep your stocking if appropriate to you, the more money is made available. It should be noted that there are a number of stocking densities that we've been exploring on moorlands, so you will be able to tailor what's right to your habitat. We've also introduced a supplement for keeping cattle and ponies on moorland. And this, again, has a variable payment rate depending on the proportion of cattle and ponies that you intend to keep on your moorland. Some of you will note that we already have a version of this in Countryside Stewardship called SP6. But just to say, SP6 will also cover cattle and ponies going forwards. We're also paying people a payment for actively managing their stock while on moorland. So managed livestock grazing on moorland could also be called shepherding on moorland if you find that easier. And that's in recognition that there's quite a lot of work that goes into managing stock on moorland, particularly if you have blanket bog type areas where stock need to be actively encouraged to be off those areas so the areas can recover or have the greatest environmental benefit. So we want to provide payment to support people to do active management of stock on their moorlands, and that's what sits in that payment rate. The 4 at the bottom are designed to pay for more complex habitat management actions. So general moorland management brings kind of everybody into a standard management practice for moorlands. And the ones further down support specific circumstances. So if your moorland has capacity to store water to benefit flood and drought resilience, that's the first supplement. The second one is if you're looking at peatland restoration or re-wetting peat. And the third one is around if you want to install features to help mitigate or manage the risk of wildfire on your moorland, there will be payment for that too. I think one that I'm going to flag, if it's all right to do so, is the re-wetting peat supplement. Some of you will be familiar with UP5 as it exists at the moment, which is the re-wetting supplement on uplands. That has a substantially lower payment rate and will essentially be replaced with the new re-wetting supplement, which has a much higher payment rate. And again, that's another payment that we've shifted around in recognition of the work that some of these actions require and making sure we're paying farmers fairly for the work that they do. I also wanted to flag these. Perhaps I'm a little biased, but I'm the species recovery and management lead, so I wanted to talk about these. Majority of these are also going to be available on moorlands. So there's threatened species supplements. So if you've got specific threatened species on your land, this might be available to you if you want to do specific actions to support those. Species covered are things like curlew. But also if you've got other land that isn't moorland, always bear this supplement in mind if you have particular species on your land that might benefit from certain actions. We've also expanded our grazing land using native breeds at risk offer so that it's not available on a very limited number of areas. It will be available much more broadly going forwards. And there's a number of options at the bottom of this around invasive species control. So some of you may deal with invasive plants or rhododendron on your moorland or bracken or deer. Again, if those are a problem on your moorland, all of these will be available to you to support you to manage those problems. So more than happy to talk about those in more detail later as well. And in particular, because it was referenced earlier by Dan, and I always think it's important to talk about, we also have a number of new actions for boundaries that I think are particularly worth discussing in a moorland context. So boundaries can include hedgerows, which already exist in SFI, but also going forward will include dry stone walls, earth banks, stone-faced hedge banks, etc. Boundaries can improve biodiversity, provide food and habitat for plants and wildlife, etc. And we're improving our existing offer by introducing new actions for maintaining additional types of boundary features beyond the existing actions for hedgerows. So as you can see, dry stone walls, banks and stone-faced hedge banks will be covered going forwards. I'm going to whip through towards the end to give plenty of time for questions, but just a flag, I focused on sustainable farming incentive and countryside stewardship in this talk. But if anybody's got an interest in landscape recovery, which supports large-scale and long-term projects, then please bear it in mind. This is particularly designed for land owners and managers who want to take a more radical and large-scale approach to producing environmental and climate goods on their land alongside food production. The vast majority of projects selected for landscape recovery in both rounds that have already gone through have involved land managers and farmers, including a number of tenants, working together to deliver environmental benefits. And as you can see from this slide, the first round, we had 22 projects and they're providing more than 260, providing support for more than 260 threatened species and restoring large areas of rivers. And the second round of projects, we had 34 projects with over 700 land managers, which is really exciting. And those projects include support for more than 160 protected sites and more than 35,000 hectares of peatlands, which is really exciting. Just to iterate some of our environmental targets before I sort of try and wrap up. We're trying to support the delivery of our environmental targets through the Environmental Improvement Plan and Net Zero Growth Plan. But we also have a target of getting 70% of farmers and farmland being in schemes. We want to increase uptake of scheme actions, particularly on specific habitats, and we want to support longer and larger scale actions. So all of everything I've talked about today is designed to help achieve these things, making these schemes work for you so that more of you come into them, and that in turn helps deliver our targets while supporting a thriving farm business sector. I just want to talk very briefly about one-off grants, and then I will wrap up. So there are some one-off grants now available. So I mentioned capital grants earlier. You should also be aware of Tree Health Pilot, but there's also a number of research and development and animal health and welfare grants opening shortly. More grants are also coming, it's worth saying. Becky referenced the blog earlier, but just to say, please sign up for it because it provides a lot of information when things are announced. But we're expecting further rounds of things like the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund, which pays for the purchasing of equipment, and further round of some of our larger capital grants like the Farming Transformation Fund, which can pay for things like cattle housing, water management, slurry infrastructure, etc. And we will provide more information about these, so you can see there's a number of kind of later in 2024s on this slide. So there are a number of new things coming. Please do keep an eye out on the blog and similar for more information. Final message for me, or final messages, please don't forget you can be in more than one of these schemes at once. So if more than one thing has perked your interest today, please check whether those things are compatible and can be stacked together. Please don't think you're limited to one offer. And also please note that if you receive funding from other sources, so for example, you have private finance that supports some of your actions, you can also stack public and private finances as a general rule across our schemes, as long as you're not receiving money for the same thing twice. And therefore, please do explore what's available to you and what works for you on your land, because we hope we've created something for everyone. The Farm Resilience Fund is, if you receive BPS, there is free advice available. Granted that that's until March 2025, so do get in with that one while it's open. And there are also things like catchment sensitive farming advisors that can provide free advice and support as well. So please do explore where you can get your advice from, as well as the blog and other things we've mentioned today. And if anybody really likes a QR code, I will briefly flash this up, but you can scan this on your mobile phone to get a direct link to the Deaf for Farming blog, and also a direct link to where you can find more information about SFI. No internet, don't worry. Please phone the RPA, who will be around and happy to support you. I will stop talking now, and hopefully it's okay. I'll take a brief drink of water and I will hand back to Becky, who will run the Q&A from the Slido. But thank you all very much for listening, and look forward to hearing all of your feedback.
Thank you so much, Mel. I think you deserve a short break. There might be some questions coming your way shortly, but I'll make sure you've got time to come around a bit. And I think I've put a reminder in the chat to pop your questions or vote questions on Slido. And I will get to the first question now. We've got a lot coming in at the moment, but we've also got a lot of people online who can try and answer as many as possible. Okay. First question. I'm going to leave the first one just for now, because I think I'm going to come to you, Mel, and we'll do the next one down. Will it be possible to end HLS agreements to transition to SFI? Currently, there are people stuck in HLS rollovers who want to swap, but apparently RPA may be insisting on penalties. I think we have India on online.
Yeah, I can take that one. No, I just want to first acknowledge the frustration on the movement between schemes for CS and DS. I know that's been questions that customers been asking for, possibly think since last year, and I understand the frustration that there's not going to be much movement on that one. Unfortunately for HLS, we don't have any kind of option for that at the moment, so that would still be the usual rules for exiting HLS early. So unfortunately we don't have anything to share on that, but if we do have anything to share on exiting HLS to move into SFI, that will be shared. But just to remind that you can have an SFI agreement on top of HLS, as long as you don't have any overlapping and dual funding on that one.
Thanks, India. And I think Mel mentioned in her presentation that there'll be more information about high tier coming out soon. So please subscribe to the blog and you'll receive any updates as soon as they're available. Right, I'll move on to the next question, which I'm hoping Mel you can try and answer if you've had a chance to have a look at it. But can you confirm how the native breed supplement will work? Which breeds can they go? Which breeds, and can they go on a common? For example, stocking densities.
Yes, no problem. So the native breed supplement, as said, actually in the question itself, but also in the presentation, is a supplement. So the stocking density that it sits on top of is largely determined by the action underneath, because actually delivery of supporting native breeds at risk isn't stocking density connected, if you see what I mean. The habitat management underneath might be. The amount that you get paid will vary depending on the percentage you stock with, because we didn't want to assign specific numbers. You must have a minimum of X cows, for example. It's dependent on the percentage that you stock on that habitat. So, for example, if you stock 50% as a native breed, you might get one payment. If you stock 100% as a native breed, you may get a higher payment. We are currently exploring this supplement on commons. But my understanding is the intention is that it will be made available on commons going forwards, but we just need to continue to work through the policy and how we would actually deliver that. So hopefully we will publish more information on that later this year, but I can give you a sense of where we intend to go with that, and I hope that's helpful. And also, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat now. I've talked too much this morning. It would turn out, so apologies, I sound a bit croaky.
Thanks, Mel. You get a drink and I'll maybe come back to you in a moment with a different question, but thank you. Next one, I think we may have to take this one away, but please, panel, tell me if you can have a go. When do you anticipate all commons will have the MOR1 active agreements, so MOR1? Rollout on the ground is very, very slow at the moment. Does anyone want to come in on that one?
I think that one in RPA is one that we'll just have to take away and check with the team that's leading on that. But I think, as you said, Becky, any questions we do take away will be in a blog post afterwards. So it's not that we're not going to answer the question. We're just going to take away to make sure I get the right information.
Thanks, India. I'll make sure we take that one away. Next question, and I think it's one we covered in the presentation, but we can certainly clarify. Steve Barkley said on Farming Today this morning he does not want 100% of a farm in a scheme. Does this apply in the uplands? So I think this is in reference to the limits that we've put on a few of the SFI actions. Can anyone clarify whether that applies to uplands?
I can talk about the limits if that's useful. So I must confess, I didn't listen to Farming Today this morning. I usually catch up at lunchtime, so I will do that and keep an eye on what the Secretary of State has said. However, so I can't comment on if he's made a statement around 100% of farming scheme, but I can comment on the action limits for uplands. So the action limits, where we're saying a maximum of 25% of your farm may come into those actions within sustainable farming incentive, that is currently limited to just the 6 that I put on the screen earlier. So just to confirm, that's IPM 1, AHL 1, 2, 3, and IGL 1 and 2. Not MOR 1, which is the one that's currently available for the uplands. And they are mainly, if you have a look at those codes or look back at the slide deck from the recording, they are mainly the ones that are intended to be flower-rich margins, pollen and nectar flower mix, etc. So they're intended to deliver on small areas of land. We will need to explore for the new actions in 2024 whether there are any limits that need to be applied to those in order to maximise their environmental delivery while supporting food production. But we will confirm that later this year. I'm not currently aware of an intention on uplands to limit the size of farm that can apply, but we can provide further clarity in future if necessary. And I look forward to an interesting Farming Today by the sounds of it at lunchtime.
Thanks, Mel. I think I'll give it a listen as well. Next question, and I think we've probably covered this. So when will clarity on this year's offer? When will there be clarity on this year's offer? This person says it's quite difficult to commit at the moment as they don't know what's coming next. But I think we've clarified there will be more information on the new actions quite soon. So they'll go live in the summer. and it shouldn't mean sort of holding off from applying from SFI now. Like Dan said, you can apply and have an SFI agreement now, and then you can actually have another SFI agreement with the new actions when they come out. So please don't delay. You could be getting money now if you apply. Next question is about dry stone wall maintenance. What if different landowners own each side of the dry stone wall? And I think this relates to management control. Jeanette, were you going to come in?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you need to have management control of both sides of the wall, basically, before you can enter that in. That's a very short answer. We'll be given a lot more details when we publish more information about the offers. But yeah, you need to be able to do the action on both sides of the entire length of the wall that you're entering in.
Thanks, Jeanette. Next question. And I think this is you again. Can you explain how the agroforestry options will work? Do existing hedges and woodland strips count as agroforestry?
Yeah, so these are in-field agroforestry actions only. So field boundaries and things like that won't be eligible. Systems should be planted a reasonable distance from field boundaries. So it's all about in-field agroforestry. Yeah, so those hedges won't be eligible.
Fab. Thank you. I'm just going to, we've got a question for Dan. Sorry, Dan, I'm hoping you're still online. We do have a question here.
Yes, I'm still here.
Fab.
That question about walling was mine, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for popping it in, Dan. I'm sure others were wondering that as well. This question for you is about how do payments compare with any previous stewardship scheme and BPS that you were in? Were you in CS before?
Right. We weren't in any schemes prior to this apart from the BPS. All we got was BPS. Having said that, we got some woodland creation for the woodland that we did in 2008, which ran out last year. But none of that is in SFI, so that was kind of parking that. In terms of how it compares, well, it's not paying the same as BPS was. So that's why I sort of said this about this year being critical about how many of the extra actions are going to help maybe fill the gap. I personally feel quite confident about the way we run our farm. Hopefully they will fill the gap, but at the moment SFI on its own isn't filling the BPS gap. So on that though, you mentioned about the Farm Resilience Fund. We've done that, and that was very helpful. So anyone that hasn't actually gone for that free farming advice, I would do it. It's very straightforward, and they send an advisor to sort of help give you business advice, of which some of that filling of business advice on how you can fill that gap between BPS and these other schemes. So we weren't in it. To answer the question, the SFI payments are less than the BPS, and we weren't in any of the schemes before, so I can't really compare it to that.
Thanks, Dan. It's really good to hear your perspective and your experience, really. I'll move on to the next question because we are running out of time, actually. Next one is about rare breeds again. So I don't know if you can take this, Mel. Explain rare breed supplement, £7 to £11 on moorland, but then it's 92 to 146 on lowland, when native breeds can add and do graze hostile upland habitats, but are quite poorly rewarded.
Yeah, I can come in on this. So we work out all of our payment rates in an income foregone plus cost model, and we've looked quite carefully at the payment rates for native breeds going forwards. It's worth saying that in part, those payment rates have changed to make those more stackable with other things. So for those of you who are familiar with, for example, the cattle grazing supplement on moorlands, that has not previously been compatible with the native breeds at risk supplement. It will be compatible going forwards. So in part, we've had to look at modifying payment rates and payment approaches to make these stack on top of more things so that farmers can use them to build kind of payments and actions that are more appropriate for them. going forwards. We will provide more detail about which habitats and which breeds are eligible under those offers as part of upcoming announcements. So if it's all right, I'll just wait for that information to come out publicly, and then hopefully that will help to answer that question. And if it doesn't, please get back in touch under a blog post or similar. I'm more than happy to pick up further detail.
Thanks, Mel. Next question, I think, Jeanette, you said you could maybe tackle about native ponies playing a vital role in biodiversity. Taking all grazing animals off the fells for winter, how does that make any sense in supporting nature recovery?
Yeah, so I think, so Melanie's touched a bit on ponies as well. So we've acknowledged through this development of the scheme how important ponies can be, and grazing some of those difficult habitats and creating more varied sward, which is why we've amended that cattle grazing supplement to include ponies, so that if a proportion of your grazing stock or cattle or ponies, you can apply for that supplement on top of your grazing action. So that's an additional payment for those with ponies. In terms of stock exclusion, so we have a new offer, which is the action that, again, Melanie went through, which is that shepherding action, where there'll be a payment to shepherd stock whilst they're on the moorland, and then also a payment to take stock off for different times of the year, and payment rates vary depending on how long the stock will be off the moor. Now, it's likely within that stock exclusion that we won't include resident ponies. And resident ponies means ponies that are traditionally kept on the moorland. And again, that's in recognition that sometimes they can't be moved or removed from the moor. So that is likely, but as we've said, we will be publishing more of this information in terms of eligibility, etc. So that detail will come out, but we very much acknowledge that that is an issue with some ponies on the moors.
Thank you. There is another sort of comment about native breeds, and they want to know which sheep or cattle to keep or sell. I think there is a current list, but are we planning on updating that when the full guidance is out?
Yeah, so some of you will be familiar with the existing native breeds at risk list, which is embedded within the Countryside Stewardship Guidance. But the genetics policy team within DEFRA are looking at reviewing that, and we're currently confirming with them the timescale in terms of as soon as we can get that out to you, we will do so that you can make plans for what breeds you want to keep going forwards.
Thanks, Mel. Next question. I think, India, you may be able to come in on this one. Can we exit mid-tier early?
Yeah, so I think that might have been covered a bit in what Mel said as well. So with moving from, I'm assuming that's removing from mid-tier to SFI 23 or the new scheme. So if that isn't going to be available, that there will be some information very shortly coming out on that. So I know that we've had a lot of questions coming into the mid-tier teams on that. So we will probably have some information coming out quite shortly on that.
Thanks, India.
No worries.
Fab. We've got a few minutes left, so I'll try and cover a couple more questions. There is one about the SFI management payment, which I think we should be able to answer. So is there a minimum amount of SFI payment linked to it?
I can answer that one.
Go for it.
So there's no minimum amount of that. It's whatever's in your SFI agreement. There is a maximum amount, so it's a maximum of 50 hectares, but there's no minimum amount to receive that payment.
Thank you. I think we do have some information that, Jordan, you may be able to share from the blog about the SFI management payment, because we did increase that, didn't we, quite recently. So I think you can get double what you were able to get before if you are in an SFI agreement, and it's to help with the cost of administrating it in the first year. Is that right, India?
Yeah, so it's we pay the management payment up to a maximum of 50 hectares. So what the current rate is £20 per hectare. What the increase will be £40 per hectare for the first year of your SFI agreement. If you're already in an SFI agreement, that will also be paid retrospectively as well.
Thank you. Right. I think we're back onto the grazing topic. Sorry, Mel and Jeanette. A clear split between the grazing payments and general management. Will there be a mechanism to have a grazing only agreement on commons and shared grazing?
Yeah, so I think actually, if it's all right, I'll take a couple of the ones that are at the top simultaneously. So we've designed the new moorland offer to be much more flexible going forwards than perhaps it has been previously. It should be noted within that for triple SIs, you will still need to have a discussion with your Natural England advisor. So if you're in that circumstance, just to answer that question, you will still need to talk to a Natural England advisor to agree the best management for that triple SI between you. For non-triple SIs, however, we've aimed to make the offer a little bit more flexible, so you will be able to choose what works for you in that space and what you think will deliver the environmental benefits for you. On that basis, we are intending for it to be possible for you to have grazing payments if they're, if doing the grazing alone is going to achieve environmental benefits on your moorland. You can combine the grazing with some of the more complex water management activities if that's going to be appropriate to deliver peatland restoration. It slightly depends on your intention and your circumstances. We're aware that on moorlands and particularly on commons, sometimes ownership and agreeing agreements can be quite a complex process, and that's part of the reason for trying to make things as flexible as possible so that people, farmers specifically, can set up agreements that work and are correct for them and their circumstances. So hopefully that pulls that question, and hopefully also pulls out the question around, apart from SFI Moor 1, will everything set in countryside stewardship higher tier? Just to say that's not necessarily the intention. More information will be published about exactly which scheme these actions sit in going forwards. However, I think it's fair to say that we're expecting some of the moorland offer, particularly around the grazing actions, to sit outside of countryside stewardship and, as I say, be more flexible, particularly in non-triple SI areas for those that want to undertake that work separately. I've lost my voice entirely now, so I'll stop talking.
Thanks, Mel. I think you covered off quite a few questions there. We have actually run out of time, but please don't worry. If we can, we'll post some answers in the follow-up blog to anything that's been unanswered. So we do have a record of everything that you've asked today and everything that you've shared with us, whether it's your experience. That will be shared within our policy team and with our RPA colleagues. So thank you very much for coming along today. I will pop a quick survey in the chat, which will, if you fill in, will help us improve these sessions in future. I think the main message from today, I don't know if anyone else wants to come in as we sign off, but please do have a look at some of the guidance around what you can apply for now, and then you can add on to your agreements later in the summer when the new actions are out. I can see lots of links just being shared in the chat by Jordan. So we have a link to future webinars. Please do keep an eye on that. There is the Defra Farming blog, and there are lots of events that we are at in person as well if you really want to come and speak to us face to face. And if you do need any help and support, if you do have a specific agreement question, please contact the RPA directly with your SBI number, and they will be able to have a chat with you about that. So thank you everyone who supported today, particularly to our farmer Dan for joining us and sharing his experience as well. But unless anyone's got anything else to say, we can leave it there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.